In hindsight, it's so interesting seeing the state of the Sega Saturn in Japan when compared to, well, everywhere else. In both the US and Europe, the Saturn was pretty clearly a flop, only managing a fraction of the sales of its predecessor. Sega had held a fairly firm grip on the video game market throughout the 16-bit days, rivaling even Nintendo's massive numbers, but with the following generation, Sega had to settle for third place. Sony had entered the console gaming market and almost immediately took the lead, whereas Sega took stumble after stumble that prevented them from closing the gap. But in Japan, the Saturn actually did fairly well for itself. The PlayStation still dominated, of course, but contrary to everywhere else in the world, it was actually the Saturn that claimed the silver medal, managing to outsell the Nintendo 64. This was an ironic turn considering that Sega consoles up until then had consistently struggled to find a wide audience over there. What was easily the poorest selling Sega console internationally was easily the most popular Sega console ever in Japan. Due to the Mega Drive's lack of a mainstream audience in Japan, even Sonic the Hedgehog had never really found the same level of fame over there that he had in the rest of the world. After the release of Sonic Team's hit Saturn platformer, Nights into Dreams, Sega and Sonic Team would receive a number of letters from fans asking who the Sonic in the Sonic Team logo was, and Sonic creators Yuji Naka and Naoto Oshima saw this as a sign that it may be time to try to reintroduce the character to their newly burgeoning Japanese audience. This would result in Project Sonic, an attempt to boost brand awareness for Sonic in Japan, and Phase 1 of this project would be to release a collection of the classic Sonic titles on the Saturn to hopefully reach an all-new audience. In June 1997, just 3 days shy of the Hedgehog's 6th birthday, Sonic Jam would be released for the Sega Saturn. In much the same way that Super Mario All-Stars was a collection of 4 classic Mario titles repurposed for a new generation of hardware, Sonic Jam compiled the 4 mainline Genesis Sonic titles onto one disc for the Sega Saturn. Unlike several later Sega and Sonic compilations, though, Sonic Jam isn't simply a bunch of ROMs dumped onto a disc. All 4 games have been faithfully rebuilt from the ground up to run natively on Saturn hardware, and because of this means they were able to add a handful of new tweaks and features to the games themselves. Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, and Sonic & Knuckles are all included, with the latter including all the possible lock-on capabilities of the original cartridge. Each of the 4 games also offer time attack modes, and even a mode that lets you play through all the special stages. In the options menu for each title, you can view the game's original manuals in both English and Japanese, and you can remove the 10-minute time limits for each game as well. They even retroactively added the spin dash into Sonic 1 by default, but this too can be toggled off in case you want a more faithful experience. To top it off, every game features autosaves, which will remember your exact act and score, something even Sonic 3's built-in saves wouldn't do. You're only granted 1 save file per title, and it's overwritten the second you start a new game, but hey, that's still more than you get playing the original Genesis carts. All 4 games also offer 3 different difficulty settings: easy, normal, and original, which I guess would imply that original is the hardest. Original is, as the name implies, the original games with no changes, where normal mode sees slight tweaks to each level's layout that softens some of their trickier segments, such as more useful and plentiful power-ups and placing additional platforms along bottomless pits. The special stages are also made easier across the board. The ring requirements in Sonic 2 have been reduced, and the special stages in 3 and Knuckles will never speed up. Meanwhile, Easy Mode truly lives up to its name. You only play 1 act from each zone, even more of the game's obstacles have been cleared out, and each boss only takes 3 hits to defeat. Throughout all of Sonic 1 and Sonic 2, you fight just 5 bosses in total on Easy Mode. The easy modes of Sonic 3 and Knuckles do actually remove about half of the giant rings, so that the player is less likely to abuse Super Sonic, and because of the way special stages work in Sonic 1, it's actually impossible to get all the Chaos Emeralds. You simply don't play enough acts to get them all. But since there's no Super Sonic in Sonic 1 anyway, it's not that big a deal. Sonic Jam is interesting in that it's the first time Sonic Team revisited their old games and reevaluated them with years of hindsight, making small but noticeable alterations in an attempt to legitimately improve on the original experiences. In a lot of ways, it feels like the Sonic Jam versions of these games were meant to be the true experience moving forward. After all, there's a reason they call the difficulty levels normal and original, and not something like arranged and classic, and as evidenced by the fact that the included time attack modes use the revised maps instead of the originals. Sonic Team was acknowledging that their old levels weren't perfect, and they were addressing some of the most egregious cases here. One major example is that the final bosses for both Sonic 1 and 2 now provide a small handful of rings before the battles start. Not enough to guarantee the player a victory, but enough to give them just a bit of wiggle room to practice and improve without feeling overly punished. Before, it was one hit and you're dead, but now you have a little more room to breathe. It's actually disappointing that future re-releases and collections of these games would discard these updated levels and difficulty settings. Sure, most of the re-releases after this were just running the original Genesis ROMs, but even the mobile phone and Sonic Origins versions, which were rebuilt from scratch much like Sonic Jam was, don't include the updated level layouts in any capacity. Even exhaustive fan remakes like Sonic 2 Absolute or Sonic 3 Air, which are meant to be these comprehensive, all-encompassing, definitive versions, don't include any of the Sonic Jam-specific maps among their wealth of customizable features. That being said, the Sonic Jam ports of these games aren't perfect. The music, for one, has seen improvements, but we also see a few new problems popping up as well. The good news is that it's all running off of high-quality CD audio and is 100% faithful to the Genesis games. And the fact that it no longer has to share any audio channels with the sound effects means you can actually hear the full instrumentation at all times without sound effects butting in. For example, this nice little piano solo in Ice Cap Act 2 used to share a sound channel with the rings and so would normally be drowned out by the sound effect, but here that's no longer the case. But CD audio also comes with the usual caveats, and say it with me, children, the music can't loop and always has to start from the beginning if it's interrupted. In most cases this isn't a problem, as the tracks go on long enough that I never heard them fade out, but it can result in some weird quirks under certain circumstances. During your score tallies, for instance, if the Extra Life jingle interrupts the level clear music by even a fraction of a second, the level clear music will play again from the beginning. This means I sometimes heard the level clear jingle restart 2 or 3 times in a row. A few of the sound effects are also a slightly different pitch, as a result of being recreated for the Saturn, but that's really more of a subjective thing, and your mileage may vary on whether you prefer the new sounds or the old ones. And when compared to the Genesis versions, there are a small number of new performance issues that pop up. On the plus side, the limited 3D effects of the original games are much smoother in this version. Sonic 3's title screen was originally a choppy mess, but here it's just like wham! And the load times you'd expect from the switch to CDs are thankfully kept very minimal. The games themselves take a few seconds to boot from the menu, but after that you're basically good to go. However, even though the games were rebuilt to run specifically on the Saturn, there is still noticeable slowdown at times, with the worst instances seeming to occur most frequently in Sonic 2 and the Sonic 3 and Knuckles special stages. In both instances this isn't great, as these games always depend on the player being able to react at a moment's notice, and sudden frame rate drops can obviously screw with the player's input. But it's especially damning in the special stages, as those really rely on making precise jumps and turns. But to me, these performance issues can be overlooked due to the new content and features these versions of the games provide. None of these games came with built-in time attack modes before, but here they all do, right out of the box, complete with restart and quit options right there on the pause menu. No other Sonic compilation had the option to play the special stages by themselves either. Granted, most people don't really like the special stages, but the option being there is still great. And we wouldn't get another version of these games with built-in autosaves until, what, Classic Collection on the DS in like 2010? And just in case that all wasn't enough to convince you, they even removed the Barrel of Doom from Sonic 3. The game is literally perfect now. What truly makes Sonic Jam stand out, however, is its bonus gallery mode, known as Sonic World. Touted as Sonic's first proper playable appearance in 3D, Sonic World consists of a small but wide-open level for the player to run around in and explore, featuring a series of small challenges to complete, and littered with various museum buildings that house galleries and bonus videos, all with a completely controllable camera with 3 toggleable angle presets: a default behind the back, a zoomed-out overhead view, and a dynamic camera that shifts to cinematic angles as you move. It's even fully compatible with the Saturn Circle Pad. Using the standard D-pad will cause Sonic to gain speed gradually, but the Circle Pad allows for dynamic real-time speed control depending on how far you push the stick in a given direction. Sonic World is something of a technical marvel for its day, built using Yuji Naka's Knights engine and showing off some of the most advanced 3D graphics seen on the Saturn. I'd go so far as to say it's nearly visually on par with Mario 64. The environment lacks any noticeable clipping or glitching, with no pop-in or fog to hide graphical limitations, or even any load times. You can see from one end of the stage to the other clear as day, which was something incredibly difficult to pull off on the hardware. Case in point, Sonic R came out just a few months after this game, and Traveler's Tales had to resort to a lot of simulated fog and transparencies and pop-ins in order to keep that game running smoothly. But here, everything is going off without a hitch. And this all serves as a reminder that Sonic Team had a huge advantage when developing for the Saturn when compared to third-party dev teams. Being one of the top in-house SEGA teams meant Sonic Team was intimately familiar with the hardware, on top of Yuji Naka being a genuinely talented programmer. The Saturn was quite infamously difficult to program for, with many third-party developers absolutely confounded by the system's architecture, but Sonic Team made it all look so easy here, and Sonic World was proof that the Saturn could perform really impressive feats when actually programmed correctly. Sonic World, in truth, began as an early build of what would eventually become Sonic Adventure, back when the game was still planned to be released on the Saturn rather than the Dreamcast. Instead of letting all the created assets go to waste, Sonic Team decided to incorporate it into Sonic Jam, forever providing us with a little window peeking into what could have been. Really though, that's all this Sonic World mode really amounts to, a preview. It's essentially a tech demo. As one critic put it at the time, Sonic Team has created the best game select menu ever. Still, this is by far the most effort Sega or Sonic Team has ever put into a Sonic collection, aside from maybe Sonic Origins. Sonic Jam feels like Sonic Team actually cared about the final product, actually reevaluating their own games with a renewed sense of passion in years of hindsight. Whereas Sonic Mega Collection, Sonic Gems Collection, Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection, etc. were all essentially an assortment of ROM files shoved onto a disc. Some of those compilations also contain galleries, sure, but there are times where those galleries just feel like advertisements, with Mega Collection and Gems Collection including trailers for then-upcoming titles like Sonic Advance 2 and Sonic 06. The galleries in Sonic Jam feel more pure somehow, truly a celebration of everything that's come before. Sonic Jam came up with official character profiles for the main cast for probably the first time. It compiled a bunch of old Sonic TV adverts and listed cheat codes for the classic games hidden within the environment, back when you couldn't just look up this stuff on YouTube or Game FAQs. It was the first time we ever got to see the animated cutscenes from Sonic CD at full resolution, without all the compression of the Sega CD or PC versions. It even showed off a few animated shorts that were formerly internal proof-of-concept videos that few in the general public even knew existed, such as Sonic Ride and Man of the Year. Man of the Year, by the way, was the first time Sonic Team worked with TMS Entertainment, an animation studio known for their work on shows like Animaniacs, Tiny Toons, and Batman the Animated Series, and who would again work with Sonic Team years later to create Sonic X. And these galleries, that include the old Sega newsletter art, will always be inherently nostalgic to me, someone who grew up familiar with it via the Sonic screensaver included in the Sonic & Knuckles collection. Most meaningful of all, though, is the Hall of Fame gallery, a walk through all of Sonic's history up to this point, highlighting not only major game releases, but also the Sonic TV shows and even world events involving the brand, ranging from the time Sonic had a gene named after him, to a European soccer sponsorship, to an American ad campaign with Cherry Coke. Oshima and Naka note that compiling this info was one of the most challenging parts of creating Sonic Jam, as there were several Sonic games made by other studios that they had no knowledge of, and researching the brand and hunting down all these obscure little factoids to include was pretty time-consuming. After all, this was before the days of Google being able to do all this for us. They likely had to dig through Sega archives and old newspapers and make phone calls to find some of this stuff, and it just goes to show how much genuine hard work the team put into making Sonic Jam into a true celebration of the franchise. Of course, Sonic World Mode probably isn't enough to make Sonic Jam worth it on its own, and in the modern day, all 4 of these classics have been released on practically every console and machine known to man, and so in the modern day, it can sort of feel like Sonic Jam has outlived its purpose. Back then, it was by far the most convenient and affordable way to play the classic titles, with Sonic World being a massive cherry on top. Critic reception at the time was pretty alright. Jam was considered a great value for its price, but some felt the franchise wasn't quite old enough for people to be nostalgic about these games yet. Even Sonic 1 was only 6 years old at this point. While most agreed that the games had aged relatively well, at least one critic expressed that the classic Sonic formula had already grown stale by 1997. But the biggest criticism by far, and in fact my only real disappointment with Sonic Jam, is that it didn't also include Sonic CD, a then critically acclaimed game that was originally released on a much more obscure console, and that many people at the time were begging to be made more accessible. Including CD would have made Sonic Jam feel that much more complete as a collection, and especially with Naka and Oshima reunited for the first time since Sonic 1, it would have been nice to see the original Sonic team reevaluate and tweak CD's levels and gameplay the same way they did the other classic games here. Sonic Jam also, unfortunately, didn't really succeed in its mission to make Sonic more popular in Japan, and the Saturn would continue to lack any major Sonic releases after this. Ironic that the only SEGA console to actually do well in Japan was also the only one without any mainline Sonic games. Still, I don't think any Sonic compilation will ever match Sonic Jam for me when taken as a complete package. There's a certain wistfulness to all this that strikes me every time I go through these galleries. At this point in the franchise, Sonic Team was just starting to realize the impact these games had on the world at large. It was when they finally began to embrace the fact that these games, this character, would be a huge part of their legacy. Sonic Jam came out at a time when enthusiasm and respect for Sonic was still high, and where the future of the franchise still looked bright. Future Sonic compilations may have included more games or included a few new quality of life improvements, but of them all, Sonic Jam is the one that feels the strongest as an overall package. Mega Collection has more total games, but they're just straight emulation with no new features, and I find the collection's bonus content underwhelming. Gems Collection compiles some of the rarer titles, but 2 of those 3 aren't even really all that good in the first place. Realistically, Sonic Origins is probably the overall best way to play these games in an official capacity. Those versions have the most features and widest breadth of options and are readily available on all modern consoles. But while Origins bonus content is slightly more expansive than Jam's, Sonic World just feels like an incredible extra mile that no other Sonic compilation since has ever really lived up to. Sonic Origins has 3D renditions of each game's islands, but can you imagine how much cooler it would be if you could explore those in Saturn-style 3D graphics instead of just admiring them from afar? There are better ways to play these games nowadays, and Sonic World is really more of a cool novelty than anything else, but when it all comes together along with an excellent collection of bonus galleries and a palpable sense of effort and care infused into everything, what you get is, in my opinion, still the best Sonic collection ever made.